class, so we're going to go ahead and look at your images where you're taking a picture of the same subject in two different ways. And I think you can read this assignment a lot of ways, and I kind of left it open for you too. So if you have done the reading, obviously you have, for the module, we have fine art, documentary, commercial, wedding, beauty, like editorial, corporate, lots of different ways that you can photograph. But then I also showed you as examples a couple of students' images that kind of fell into those two categories. But then Callahan's work, where his images are mostly all fine art. Some are more intimate portraits, some are more abstracted. There's one in there that even looks like more documentary. So I wanted to keep this open, so you're just really photographing the same person in two different approaches, and just thinking of how you can show like two different sides of someone with your images. And some of you guys did a great job with that. Looking ahead, I want you guys to be thinking about the technical side of things. So up until Module 3, there hasn't been much about the technical side of these portraits. And most of you are photo majors, so you already know the technical side of it. Some of you are not photo majors, so the lighting side of it has been a little bit trickier. So Module 3 is when you guys are going to learn about the tools a little bit more, as well as learn about lighting a little bit more. And I want you to really key in on that, and your grades will start to be impacted by the lighting in your images. And I want you to think about not only what lighting is most pleasing to your subject as far as portraits go, but also what is furthering your narrative with your stories, with your images, that's a big part of what we're looking for as well. So flattering lighting, but sometimes that might not be the intent of your image. You're going to be balancing that narrative or that concept and how the lighting affects that, along with the desire to have lighting that is most flattering to your subject. All right, we're going to start off with Lauren's images, and I think these are great examples. If you're not a photo major, I'm in Lightroom. I want to make sure that's really clear. And I'm looking at all of the metadata over here, right? So here, this first image is by Lauren. And again, it's a fine art, reflective, conceptual image. She's at ISO 100, 50 millimeters, f2.2 at 1/1600th of a second. She has a subject that's very blurred out on the left side of the screen, reaching out, making us feel as though we are this person, putting us in their spot, and reflecting that image of them back. So it has a very contemplative sort of view to it, kind of understanding ourselves and how we see ourselves, and how others are seeing us, really. The light here looks like it's evening light. We can look at the time over here. It's almost 6 p.m. Evening light has a warmth to it. We're getting that shadow coming across her face from the nose. So we know this is like airing a little bit more towards that Rembrandt lighting. But that warmth of the image also reflects her hair color and affects her skin tone and is working really well. So this is a beautiful image. And then we bounce that off of that more conceptual image to this image where you're having a very like fashion beauty sort of image. You're nice and close to your subject. She's all made up here. You can see how the lighting in this just changes the shape of her face as well, from here to here, the angle of view and the lighting. She's all made up. We have great eye contact. The lighting's coming from slightly above and to the side. You can see the shadows of the nose and the chin here, but really flattering lighting on her skin, giving really beautiful tonal quality to her skin. And then that close up, this is a great example of the difference between making a fashion image and making more of a conceptual image. So great job with this, Lauren. Here we're looking at Andre's image, and you're at ISO 100, 35 millimeters, f2.8 at 12/50th of a second. So really fast shutter speed. You're getting low and shooting up at your subject. This feels like more of an editorial sort of view. And she looks like she's dressed for work, but maybe not the common work, right? Like she's dressed to go to an office, but maybe an office that has open mind about fashion. But shooting with that wider angle lens and getting low gives her a sense of power in this image. And I think that was the goal of the image, as you spoke about, that we're able to see her as taller. We're able to see her towering over us. There's a little bit of distortion that's happening. Like if we look at her feet compared to her face, there's some distortion that's happening because of that wider angle lens. Also, one thing I think that you can improve here is just popping a little bit more light on her face so it really stands out from the background. Creating that foreground background separation is clear when the shirt is black against the brick, but as her face and the tones of her face and her skin are next to the brick, there's more melding happening there. So getting a little bit of light on her to create that separation would work well. And then you have this second image, and it looks like she's in the same clothes, but it's a totally different view, right? She's in the middle of this forested area, the light's really popping on her face in this case, and pulling her out from the background, different than what we saw in the last image. Let's look at these settings. Your ISO 320, 35 millimeters. So a wider angle lens again, but your subject's in the center and you're shooting straight on at them, so we don't have that distortion like we did before. Maybe if her feet were showing, they'd be closer to the lens and we'd have some distortion there. But because you've cropped off on the shins there, we're not having that issue. F2.8 allows the foreground to fall out of focus. The background doesn't really fall out of focus, but this area does, which pushes us as the viewer further away from your subjects, gives her more of her own space within the frame, and that depth of field helps with that. And then a pretty fast shutter speed at 1/200th of a second. So this feels more like this could be in a fashion magazine that, or I'm thinking of like a clothing magazine that has more of a free-spirited view to it. So this could be a fine art image of her, and this could also be kind of fashion on that edge of, I'm always thinking of Free People as the brand that's really incorporating this idea of being out in nature and being one with nature, but also including the fashion in that. All right, and then we have, this will be the last one that we look at, and this is, I think these are the best few examples that we have from students. This one is by Bridgette, and here you're at ISO 2000. Let's actually look a little bit closer at that. ISO 2000. This is the area we'd see the digital noise, and the digital noise is obviously going to show up more when we're looking in color. You can see that it's not quite as smooth of a gradient here as it is here. So I'm guessing that this has a bit of digital noise in it, but it's not overwhelming. You're at 18 millimeters, f8 at 1/100th of a second. So those settings all look good. The 18 millimeters is not the lens that you would generally think of for a portrait where you're this close to someone. So normally thinking of like a headshot like this, or even like a torso and higher shot, we would want to use a bit of a longer lens because that's going to compress the subject, right? Right now we're expanding the space, and that makes like her forehead look further back and her cheeks and nose look further forward. So it's expanding that and exaggerating those features. Also, as we look at this, we can see how small her hand looks in regards to her face. So these are reasons why you would want to use a bit of a longer lens. I always think of 85 millimeters as kind of a standard lens for portraits. But the light that you're using is really beautiful. Window light coming in. It's hitting her chest a little bit more than her face, it looks like. So making sure that you're guiding us as the viewer with the light. So pulling, maybe in Photoshop, like dodging this area, or as you're photographing, putting something up to diffuse some of this light so it's not quite as bright on her chest, but the light is really on her face. But beautiful portrait. It has a like lovely, lovely window light on it, and it has a very reflective fine art feel to it. And then this image, you're at ISO 250, 31 millimeters, again, that wider angle lens, f6.3 at 1/100th of a second. This feels more like an editorial sort of image, where you're photographing the subject, and this could go for like a business sort of, maybe this is a picture that she wants for her business. Maybe this is selling a product, in that sense of an editorial. So this comes across as a very different image. The subject is looking straight at us. There's a sense of like power in this because we're a little bit lower than her and she's sitting down. You have a reflector, it looks like, coming in on her. We see that reflection in the eye, and that's opening her up. That's adding that catch light in her eye that's working really well. The arms are a little bit rough on that crop on these edges, so I would crop in more, or I probably would prefer to show more of her arm over here. It feels a little bit abrupt, but overall the image is creating a nice atmosphere with what's behind her, has a nice light on her, and has more of an editorial feel.